You were 5 years old when you learned that love was conditional. Not through words, through silence. Through the way your mother's face softened when you sat still in the restaurant. Through the pride in your father's voice when you told strangers how well-behaved you were. Through the gold stars on your homework, and the way teachers smiled when you raised your hand politely, never interrupting, never demanding too much space. You didn't know it then, but you were being trained. Not educated, trained. Like a performer learning their role, memorizing the script of acceptability, the choreography of compliance. Pause. Good grades. Good manners. No identity. This is the story of how you learned to disappear into other people's expectations. How you were taught that your worth was measured not by your truth, but by your ability to make others comfortable. How you became so good at being what they wanted that you forgot what you were. The question isn't whether you're a people pleaser. The question is, what happens to a person who is raised to be liked, not to be real? The classroom was your first theater. Row by row, 30 little souls learning the fundamental lie of civilization, that obedience equals worth. You sat with your hands folded, your voice quiet, your questions swallowed. You watched the disruptors get punished, sent to corners, called to offices, labeled as problems. You absorbed the lesson. Conformity keeps you safe. Compliance keeps you loved. They called it education, but it was indoctrination. Every gold star was a transaction, your authenticity for their approval. Every good job was a contract you didn't know you were signing, trading pieces of your soul for the fleeting warmth of adult praise. The truth is, you were never learning math or history. You were learning to perform. The report card became your report on your worth as a human being. A's meant you were valuable. C's meant you were failing, not at subjects, but at life itself. Your nervous system learned to spike with panic at the thought of disappointing anyone, because disappointment meant abandonment, and abandonment meant death. This wasn't conscious. You were a child. You couldn't articulate the terror of not being enough, so you became everything they wanted. The perfect student, the polite child, the one who never caused trouble. But here's what no one told you. When you learn to be what others want, you forget who you are. When your identity becomes a performance, your authentic self goes underground. It doesn't die. It just gets buried so deep that you forget it ever existed. You weren't trying to be fake. You were trying to survive. And survival, for a child, means being wanted, being needed, being approved of. The tragedy isn't that you learned to please people. The tragedy is that you learned to believe that pleasing people was the same thing as being loved. Don't cry. Those were the first words that taught you to betray yourself. Not from cruelty, but from a misguided belief that emotions were weaknesses to be overcome, not truths to be honored. Don't be difficult. Code for, your feelings are inconvenient. Your anger is unacceptable. Your sadness is a burden. Your fear is embarrassing. Your authentic emotional responses to life are problems to be solved, not experiences to be validated. Don't talk back. The final nail in the coffin of your voice. Questions became disrespect. Boundaries became defiance. Your instinct to push back against what felt wrong was labeled as rebellion, and rebellion was the ultimate sin in the gospel of good behavior. You learned to smile when you wanted to scream, to say, "I'm fine," when you were drowning, to apologize for feelings you had every right to feel. Your emotional landscape became a foreign country you were no longer allowed to visit. Pause. They didn't mean to break you. They thought they were teaching you strength. They thought they were preparing you for a world that wouldn't tolerate your inconvenient truths. They thought they were giving you tools for success. Instead, they gave you a toolbox full of self-betrayal. Every suppressed tear became a wall between you and your inner world. Every swallowed word became a barrier between you and authentic connection. Every forced smile became a mask you couldn't remove. You became so skilled at emotional management that you managed yourself right out of emotional awareness. You learned to read everyone else's feelings while becoming illiterate in your own. You could sense when your mother was stressed, when your teacher was frustrated, when your friends were upset. But you had no idea what you were feeling, because feeling had been trained out of you. The child who cried when they were hurt grew into the adult who doesn't even notice they're bleeding. The child who got angry when treated unfairly grew into the adult who apologizes for taking up space. The child who had needs grew into the adult who has learned to need nothing, to be nothing but a reflection of what others require. This is how emotional suppression masqueraded as discipline. This is how you learned to discipline yourself right out of your own life. The transformation wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like water wearing away stone. You started small, agreeing when you wanted to disagree, laughing when things weren't funny, saying yes when every cell in your body was screaming no. Each compromise felt minor, manageable, a small price to pay for the relief of acceptance. But compromises compound. Small betrayals add up to a complete loss of self. You became a behavioral chameleon, shifting colors to match whatever environment you entered. With your parents, you were the responsible one. With your friends, you were the agreeable one. With teachers, you were the helpful one. With strangers, you were the pleasant one. The problem was, which one were you? You weren't trying to manipulate. You were trying to survive. The world had taught you that conflict meant rejection, and rejection meant emotional death. So you learned to read rooms like a meteorologist reads weather patterns, constantly adjusting your behavior to avoid the storms of other people's displeasure. Your intuition became a tool for managing other people's emotions rather than understanding your own. You could sense tension and immediately deploy charm to dissolve it. You could feel disappointment and instantly offer solutions to fix it. You could detect frustration and automatically apologize to soothe it. But here's the cruel irony. The better you became at pleasing people, the lonelier you felt. Because when you're constantly performing, no one ever sees you. They see your performance. They love your function. They appreciate your service. But they don't know you, because you've forgotten how to be known. The people pleaser is always surrounded by people, but never truly seen. Always helping, but never truly helped. Always giving, but never truly received. Because to be received, you have to show up as yourself. And yourself has been missing for so long you wouldn't recognize them if they walked through the door. This wasn't a choice you made. This was a survival strategy that became an identity. This was a childhood adaptation that became an adult prison. Who are you when you're not being what someone else needs? Pause. This is the question that haunts every people pleaser in the quiet moments between performances, in the space between saying yes and feeling no, in the gap between the smile and the scream. You spent so long being a supporting character in everyone else's story that you've forgotten you were meant to be the protagonist of your own. You've become so skilled at reading the room that you've lost the ability to feel your own presence in it. The chronic exhaustion isn't just from helping everyone. It's from the constant vigilance of monitoring everyone's emotional weather while ignoring your own internal climate. It's from carrying the weight of everyone's comfort while your own needs suffocate under the pressure. You've become allergic to conflict, not because you hate confrontation, but because confrontation requires you to have a position, and having a position requires knowing what you actually think, feel, and want. And you haven't consulted those parts of yourself in so long they feel like strangers. The fear of rejection has made you reject yourself preemptively. You set boundaries like suggestions. You make requests like apologies. You advocate for yourself like you're asking for a favor you don't deserve. Because deep down, you don't believe you deserve to take up space, to have needs, to disappoint people with your humanity. The saddest part isn't that you've lost yourself. The saddest part is that you've lost yourself so completely you don't even know what you're looking for. When someone asks what you want, you genuinely don't know. When someone asks how you feel, you automatically scan them for how they want you to feel. You've become a ghost haunting your own life. This is the cost of conditional love. This is the price of performed worthiness. This is what happens when a child learns that love is something you earn, not something you are. The path back to yourself isn't pretty. It doesn't come with applause or approval or gold stars. It comes with the terrifying realization that you've been living someone else's life while your own waited in the wings. Becoming real means disappointing people. It means saying no and watching their faces change. It means expressing anger and feeling the room get uncomfortable. It means taking up space and risking the accusation that you're being selfish.
And here's the truth they never told you. You are allowed to be selfish with your own life. You are allowed to prioritize your needs. You are allowed to have boundaries that inconvenience others. You are allowed to feel what you feel without immediately rushing to fix everyone else's reaction to your feelings. The first step isn't learning to say no, it's learning to feel yes. To reconnect with the part of you that has preferences, desires, opinions that matter. To remember that your inner world is not a democracy where everyone else gets a vote. This is sacred work. It's archaeological work, digging through layers of conditioning to find the person who is buried alive under all those expectations. It's detective work, following the faint traces of your authentic self back to their source. You will lose people in this process. Let them go. The people who only loved your performance were never loving you anyway. They were loving what you did for them, how you made them feel, the problems you solved for them. That's not love, that's utility. Real love sees you mid-breakdown and doesn't try to fix you. Real love witnesses your anger and doesn't need you to apologize for it. Real love encounters your boundaries and respects them instead of negotiating them away. The journey back to yourself is the journey back to life. Not the life you were supposed to want, but the life you actually want. Not the person you were trained to be, but the person you are. You were never born to please. You were born to be. If this resonated with something deep inside you, if you saw yourself in these words, you're not alone in this journey back to yourself. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready for more conversations that dig beneath the surface of who we think we're supposed to be. And leave a comment below. What's one way you've been performing instead of being? What's one truth about yourself you've been afraid to show the world? Your story matters. Your real self, not the performance, not the pleasing version, deserves to be seen.